and welcome to the top 10 issues that Astranti has picked out that will most likely come up, but not definitely of course, in your MCS exam on Menta in the May 2018 sitting. So, without going on too fast, let's talk about why we believe these certain topics will come up. This usually revolves around our experience with the exam and also revolving around just the key issues that we've picked up in the analysis videos. So let's kick things off and go on to how we prepare for these issues. So typically you want to have key models available for the pre-seen information. Some of those do get covered in the strategic analysis video if you haven't seen that already. And then you also want to practice mock exams and learn the typical key points that we pick out here, such as the advantages and disadvantages, amongst other things. But most importantly, you just need to be prepared. This video is going to give you a rudimentary understanding of what is likely to come up, and then the onus is on you to keep that preparation up. Keep it top notch, know your stuff on these issues, and with any tiny bit of luck on top, you will be absolutely golden for the exam. So, let's go on to issue 10, and this is going to be ethics. Now, it's an issue that wasn't explicitly raised in the pre-seen. We got a lot of hints about it throughout. So, why have I chosen this as issue 10? Well, it's a key E2 topic, and this means that it's commonly examined. And furthermore, there is an opportunity for CIMA to use this as a sort of sub-question within an overarching question. So this might be revolving around an acquisition, which we know Menta like to do, and then the ethics of doing so, because as we've seen in the press coverage section, that their style of competitive advantage is not the most ethical. And finally, we know that the opinion of those handing out subsidies, so the government and school boards, are especially important, so therefore ethics are crucial to getting those subsidies. So what are some likely issues? Well, as we've kind of alluded to, increased bad publicity. They've got a predatory pricing model and the government wants to increase coverage. So when they're running little businesses out of business, once again I've used the same word twice on that kind of sentence, but with this in mind, the government's not too happy. If a big company is pushing smaller providers out of business and reducing the overall coverage that the civilians can obtain, then the government might not be so willing to offer them subsidies and actually would try to foster competition with these smaller companies. So with that in mind, bad publicity is not a good thing. And simply, it's most likely an add-on to an investment issue. Investing in an acquisition may be a possible topic, but also we may again add on to, like mentioned, a project where we're pushing out another business and then the ethics come in of to whether that's going to impact our potential subsidies. So what must we talk about in terms of ethics? Well, CIMA always push this idea of being highly ethical. So always take the moral high ground, even if you think it'd be detrimental to the business. As long as it's not too far-fetched, you just want to be ethical. And that's what CIMA is trying to promote. So in terms of the exam, the way best to achieve those marks is to ensure that your response is highly ethical. Of course, we always make a recommendation. There's often a short-term option or a long-term option, and exploring both is a good idea. And furthermore, just a final point on that highly ethical aspect, it's very, very vital that you say good ethics is just the right thing to do. Don't ask me necessarily why you have to say that, but CIMA loved this sentence. So when you're justifying your stance, feel free to say it's just the right thing to do. That might sound a little bit shallow in a way, like not a very good justification, but actually that's what CIMA want to hear. So keep that in mind. And finally, this does depend on the specifics of the question, but with Jaria buses in the press coverage section, this sort of unethical method of competition is possibly a key point we have to talk about. Public image, as we've explored, and the government interest in coverage, again, complaints by the public in the other press article regarding the sort of competitive nature of Menta. And finally, ethics are key to requiring subsidies, because subsidies are 30% of revenue. So it all kind of interlinks to this big issue. So, with that said, let's move on to issue... Oh, sorry, jumping the gun there. Theory you can use. So typically, sustainable competitive advantage is going to be quite useful here, theoretically, regarding the sort of lack of ethics being sourced within the competitive method, within the strategy. So within this, we can talk about competitive structure and also the reputational aspects to how we're going to compete. And finally, culture. Strategy and sort of approach to making profit is quite cultural sometimes. So we can look at the levels of culture and then look at what the basic assumptions are. And if our basic assumptions are to be unethical to require profit, then perhaps that's something that needs to be changed in an overarching sense. So now, for serious, let's move on to issue 9. Now this is quite a sort of typical topic. I'm not going to sort of pretend that this doesn't come up a lot. New projects are just bread and butter for the MCS exam, as well as the OCS and SCS exams. So, nothing too exciting here. This is a pretty bog standard topic that's always going to arise. So, as mentioned, basis of choice is just so common. I mean, it's just prevalent to the max. If you were going to pick absolutely any question of any list for any sort of case study exam, new projects just always there. Anyway, before rambling too much on how common it is, it's very easy to provide financial information for you. And this is where they're going to test you on F2. So it makes a lot of sense for CIMA to keep asking you these questions. And then it's got links to risks and funding, which then covers basically all the bases. They get to test you on absolutely everything in one question. So from CIMA's perspective, very, very smart choice for them to test you. So we need to be prepared. Oh, I think I've jumped the gun here. No, I haven't. Okay. So models that you can use to answer this question is simply Ansos's matrix. We need to place it in the relevant box on the matrix and talk about the typical risk levels based on that. So if you're diversifying, a lot of it, or it depends on the diversification, of course, but if you're going for that complete diversification where you're going to a new industry, completely away from what you're used to, you can talk about the risks of not having expertise, for example. And of course, Npv analysis, positive, negative, is it a reliable Npv? And what is the appropriate cost of capital? Are we using that correctly? So the likely issues are divestment. Now that might sound strange to you as a sort of new project. Typically you wouldn't expect divestment, but it's something that's come up a lot in the Menta specifically. They've spoken about the trams and selling them on, the airport, selling that on. So with a new project, it might actually be a divestment style kind of project. The Npv analysis of keeping a subsidiary versus selling it. And also we have to think about a little bit, this is a bit of a spoiler for the future issues, the competition authority risk. Menta are a huge company. Their market share is around 30% if I recall off the top of my head, and their competitor Dualbus is also very similar sort of market share, slightly higher. That means both companies are getting towards that sort of pretend rule of breaking 33% and then having a bit of a focus from these competition authorities. So actually Menta could divest actually to fall under that market share bracket, or they could diversify. So diversifying is quite a good avenue for Menta. Looking at it in sort of a brief sense, they are getting to that threshold where they are becoming close to a duopoly with Dulbus. The two of them forming like a cartel almost. We had a specific mention of not undercutting too much between them. So diversification is a good avenue to increase profits, because increasing their market share in buses could lead to this competition authority risk. So with that in mind, we need to look at the strength of competitors and sort of the opportunity level. There's probably a lot of opportunity for Menta, given they're dabbling in airports and trams. So they could probably easily diversify to a different public transport method. So what must we talk about? Well, Npv is just that standalone, always there topic that we should bring into any new project. We also have to think about whether it's consistent with CSR, with strategy, with our CSFs. If you remember, reliability amongst efficiency and sort of low cost appealing, those are the kind of CSFs for Menta. Is it consistent? Will it actually factor into these sort of key factors to promote profitability? So always ask these questions. Of course, how will it be funded? We know that Menta have a lot of capacity for more debt, so that could be a very likely avenue for them to explore. And finally, you need to make a recommendation. There's no point talking at length with all your knowledge and then not actually answer the question. It's very easy to do, especially on new projects, because there's so many different modular knowledge that you can espouse and talk about. But you could be hitting your P2, your E2 and your F2, but if you don't answer the question, you're going to lose some marks. So please don't forget that at the end of the day, give your recommendation, because otherwise it's going to be sort of a jumbled mess. And it'll be a clever mess, but it won't be the correct type of response. So keep your recommendation throughout. I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time to first extend my hope that you enjoyed the free sample that you've just viewed, but also to just sort of explain what else Astranti do to help you pass your exam really effectively, provided you found our sample particularly interesting and insightful, of course. So, of course, we have a study text for every module, ranging from P1 to F3, and the certificate level is also free on our website. So we have study texts throughout the CIMA course, every module you could hope to study. The certificate level are free, as I mentioned, and then the rest of them, ranging from P1 to F3, are all available to purchase. Alongside this, if you're not so much a study text kind of student and you prefer a visual way of learning, we have the course videos. We essentially break down the study text into bite-sized presentations with a walkthrough, and it's a very, very, very engaging way of explaining the course. Following this, we have the pre-scene analysis, where we break down each pre-scene sitting into a number of videos, going through the whole document, but also adding a top 10 recommendations for what will come up in the exam, and also a strategic analysis where we put all the models you'd find in E2, for example, to the pre-scene itself, whichever that may be at the time. Alongside this, we provide an industry analysis. This is a document and accompanying video which help you give that contextual information in your exam. So, for example, if the pre-scene's on the oil industry, the industry analysis will break down the oil industry, the current topics, trends, issues, what the competitive market looks like, all those kind of aspects, all condensed into one so you can spend your time wisely in your study period. Following on from this, when you actually want to practice all this knowledge, we have mock exams for all of our materials. So StudyText has a generic mock exam based on the module, whereas the pre-scene analysis has mocks available to purchase that are based on that specific pre-scene, that are targeted to the key issues we believe will come up. And if you're not content with just doing those mock exams and practicing that way, we have a marking and feedback system where you can purchase the ability to send in your paper, have it marked by a CIMA qualified accountant, and get personalized feedback on whether you can improve X or Y area. And sort of finally, if you will, if you're feeling really underprepared and that exam is coming really, really soon, the masterclasses are offered by Astranti, and they're essentially a crash course in anything you could want for that topic. So if it's a masterclass on the pre-scene, it's going to give you absolutely everything that you could possibly need to know about the pre-scene in one rather really condensed sitting. Likewise, if it was the F3 masterclass, you would have all of F3 gone through in a very crash course style presentation and video link. You can also purchase it post-stream as opposed to viewing it live, all these kind of aspects. We are very, very confident that these materials will help you get the exam success that you want. So we have a pass guarantee. Provided you fill out a form which demonstrates that you have utilized our materials to a large extent and actually taken the time to study them, and you have unfortunately failed, we will offer you the same materials again for the next sitting as a consolidatory offer to ensure that you can get back on the horse and get that exam grade that you want. With that said, thank you very much for watching the sample video. I hope you enjoyed it and it gives you a lot of confidence in Astranti and your CIMA future.